Hi everybody, welcome back. And as you can see, I am now wearing my lovely safety gear, my goggles, my gloves, my apron right here. Because remember I told you that you want to make sure that you're in a well ventilated area, which I am. I'm in a kitchen, and you want to make sure you have on all the safety things because like I said, you have some liquids, some indicators here that will possibly affect your clothing if you get it on your clothing, and you don't want to mess up your lovely clothes. I know I don't, because I have my little sparkly shirt on. I love sparkles, so I don't want to get anything on my white shirt. So let's go ahead and start trying to work on some of this lab. This lab has three phases. 1, 2, 3. And so what I'm going to review is phase 1. And the first thing you have to do is there's a little advanced prep. For this advanced prep, you have to obtain some food items. One food item should be something starchy like a potato or a piece of bread. I chose bread because that's what I had handy. So use whichever item you have, bread or potato or anything else you feel that's starchy. If you have potato flakes, that'll probably work as well. If you have if your mom makes the instant potatoes, you can use those. You also need something oily, like an oily fatty food. So if you have like a hamburger or pizza, any kind of cheesy oily substance that's been cooked, you can also use oil, cooking oil, olive oil, canola oil, vegetable oil. I'm going to use oil because that's what I have handy. Okay, and so I'm going to do the lab just as you would. I'm going to read the steps, follow the steps, and then when we're done with phase 1, and that'll be the end of this video. Okay, so step 1 is, and I've already read ahead a little bit, is that you were supposed to label your test tubes. And so you take your test tubes, you put a piece of tape around it, and you use a pen or a marker, and you label it. And you're supposed to label each individual test tube. So the first test tube has to be labeled water. The second test tube is labeled with the albumin. The third test tube is labeled with your unknown, and you have your little bottle of unknown substance. The fourth test tube is labeled saliva. And then your last 2 test tubes you're going to label with your food items. So I have one labeled oil and I have one labeled bread. And so that's what you do. So the first thing they say to do is, and I have my directions, so you should make sure you have all your steps printed out. Don't try to read it from the computer if you can possibly help it. It'll probably help or be a lot easier if you print it off so you can just go down 1 through 15 and follow the steps. There are 15 steps for this lab. It sounds like a lot, but once you actually kind of get started, it's not that bad. So first thing you want to do, and I am now on step 6, is obtain your 2 pipettes. And these are here. You're going to label one with water. The other pipette, you're going to label water/iodine. Because you don't want to get, and you label them so you don't get things mixed up. That's why you will label. So if you think, oh, that's dumb, I can remember everything, trust me. I have done it many a times, and I have taught many a year, and it is always best to label everything. So label your test tubes as they ask you to, label your pipettes as they ask you to, and I'm going to try to tip the camera down just a little bit. Okay? So after step 6, you're going to move on to the end. Well, on step 6, they also tell you to take a pipette and fill it halfway with distilled water. And here's my bottle of distilled water here that I'm using. And I took the test tube labeled water and I filled it about halfway. So that's step 6. Step 7 tells you to take your bottle of albumin, which is this here, and you're going to put 5 drops. And if I kind of tilt it a little bit, you kind of see it moving, slushing around. I already did that step. And you just take it and drop 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 into the test tube. And that's all I did. The next step is to use your bottle of unknown. And here's your bottle of unknown. It says unknown solution on it. You're going to take your test tube labeled unknown. You're going to put 5 drops, and I will do that step for you right here. You're going to take your unknown and you're going to put 5 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So very little. So there shouldn't be a spray. Don't just squeeze the bottle of unknown. Just 5 small little drops. And make sure when you're done with your solutions, you put the caps back on them because you don't want to spill. Okay. The next thing, and this is kind of gross, and I already did it because I didn't want to put it on camera, is they tell you to use your cup. And as you can see, I've switched cups because I almost made a mistake. Your kits come with some styrofoam cups, but then in the directions I say, make sure you do not use your K-12 cups. And I almost messed up, so I switched to a plastic cup. But you're going to use your cup and you have to spit. That's where the saliva comes from. But you have to spit in the cup, and then you're going to kind of crease the cup like this, kind of fold it in, so you can pour the saliva into the test tube. Yeah, it's kind of gross. Oh, and you can see it sliding down the side. It's so gross. I'm sorry. Make sure you can get as much of it from the cup into the test tube as possible. There's going to be a little bit in there like that. So we've done that. The next step is you're going to take your starchy item, and for me, it's my bread, and you take a fork. And I'll stand up for this. What you're going to do is you're going to take your bread, and I'll kind of tilt the camera down a little bit. You're going to use the fork, and you're just going to, you know, kind of mash it up into, I mean, this is, since I'm using bread, it's not really going to be, and I'll probably actually, I think I'm just going to tear it, just use it kind of a little bit. And the point of mashing it is just so you can break it up. Remember, in this, we're talking about biological compounds in this lab, so you want to kind of mash it up so you can kind of release the chemicals, the components that it's made of. And you're going to take this mashed up bread, and you're going to take the test tube labeled bread, and you're just going to put that little mashed up piece of bread right in there. Okay? Just like that. So then the next step is for whatever your oily food is, and I'll tilt the camera back up a little bit now. So for whatever your oily food item is, you're going to take that, and if it is a food item, you're going to mash it up and put it in the test tube. Since I'm using oil, I'm just going to take just a tiny, tiny, tiny bit of oil. And if your hand is not really steady, then you don't want to just pour. I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of oil into the test tube. Not much. Very little. Because it shouldn't take much. I'll just put a little more. In there. And there we go. And that is my test tube for oil. So now you have all your, let me put the cap, because remember when you're working with things, you want to put the cap back on it. We're going to set that to the side. Okay. So now, and remember, I'm reading my directions just like as you would, going through the steps. So we've completed step 10, which was to use your fork and mash up your food in a plate and add some of the food into the test tube. We've completed step 11, which is to use another fork to mash up the fatty or the oily food on the plate and then add that to the test tube. So we've done that. Now what you have to do is pour 4 milliliters of distilled water into a graduated cylinder. And graduated cylinder, remember when I went over equipment, is this little item here. And I do want to preface, all the items that I showed you in that previous video clip should be found in your K-12 kit. So the only things you're providing yourself are the water, the oil, and the bread or the potato, or the fatty food and the starchy food, and the cup, and the forks. So those are the only items you're providing for yourself. The forks, again, the cup, the starchy food, the fatty food, and the water. Everything else should be items that you find in your kit. So dig around until you find everything, because as we know from the previous lab, things can be hidden in those boxes. Okay? So, your graduated cylinder. And they say 4 milliliters of water. And I'll try to get as close as I can. Graduated cylinders, they have these little markings on the side. And they have numbers. Oops. They have numbers. And you have to go up to 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 milliliters. And they want you to put 4 milliliters of graduated water in your graduated cylinder. And then you're going to add 18 drops of iodine to the water in the graduated cylinder and gently stir with a stirring rod. So let me do that and then I'll show you. So I take my bottle of water, and it is, oops, and I over pour it. So that's no big deal. I poured a little bit too much water. So all you have to do is just pour it back in your bottle. And then it might be a little back and forth because it is not that easy. So now I have my graduated cylinder, and I'm just going to put that down so I can put the cap back on my water. And your bottle of iodine, which is the dark bottle, looks just like this, iodine solution. You're going to take your iodine, take the cap off of it, hopefully it's a little bit smoother than I did, and 18 drops. And iodine, again, will stain your clothes, so be careful. 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and lastly, 18. Exactly. That's pretty good, if I do say so myself. Didn't plan that. That was not a trick. Okay, so we have our graduated cylinder, we have our iodine, so let's move on. We're going to use our stirring rod. One of our stirring rods. They told us to pull out 7. And they want you to use one of the stirring rods and just stir it around. Make sure it's mixed up really well. And then you're just going to put that stirring rod to the side. So, once we move on, that was step 13. You're going to move on to step 14. You're going to use the pipette that says water and iodine. So water and iodine. And make sure you went through the process of labeling these things for a reason. So make sure you read the labeling so you don't pick up the wrong thing. You don't want to mix it up. So it says you're going to use the water iodine pipette to add a few drops of the iodine and water to each test tube. So every test tube you have here, every test tube, sorry about that, you have here, you're going to add a few drops. And a few could be 3, could be 4. It's totally up to you. I'm going to do 4 just because I like even numbers. And all I'm doing, I'm using my test tube rack. Ooh, you don't do what I just did. Almost had a big accident. My test tube almost fell out. So, one more. And okay. So now I have added the iodine water mixture to all of my test tubes. And if you can see, I'm going to turn it around really slow. Some things happened, some things changed. I'm going to let you do all that discovering of what you think occurred on your own. I'm just going to go through the steps. Okay, so then the next thing is they want you to gently stir the material in each test tube with its own stirring rod and observe the results. So you used one stirring rod already and you're supposed to pull out 7. So you have 6 left and you have 6 test tubes. So each test tube will get its own stirring rod. Six test tubes, 6 stirring rods. Gently stir and again I'm repeating the directions. Gently stir the material in each test tube with its own stirring rod. Observe the results. So you just take the stirring rod, give it a little